Okay, we left off on the slide when to teach phonics, but now we're going to discuss when to intervene. Intervention should begin in K and 1 as soon as assessment shows problems. So your school site should generally have a universal screening process at the beginning of the year where all students are assessed in reading. And from there, you should notice if any student is having difficulty in a certain domain, such as phonemic awareness or phonics. And at that point, further assessment should be done to pinpoint the skill. And then you should begin intervention. So the initial assessment should include sound, spelling, correspondence, and gradually to decoding CVC words. So right here where it says sound, spelling, correspondence, an assessment might ask a student to look at letters and they are supposed to tell you the sound. So they should do consonants and vowels, and then after that, students should be asked to decode CVC words. Now in kinder, they are not expected to decode CVC words, but towards the end of the year, they should know all their sound and spelling correspondence. Using measures of nonsense words isolates skills of decoding and can show automaticity in decoding. So some assessments, such as DIBELS, incorporate decoding nonsense words because it really forces the student to rely on their alphabetic knowledge rather than memorizations of a word. So using nonsense words is definitely an effective way of assessing a student's phonics skills. So oftentimes I have had teachers ask, why are we assessing them using nonsense words? They should be reading words. But we also need to communicate that the reason why, and this is studies have shown, is that it really helps them rely on their alphabetic knowledge rather than memorizing the words. Okay, so some strategies for phonics instruction. This can also be used in the classroom and with an RTI group. You definitely want to have some blending exercises. So you might begin with oral blending where there's no graphing involved. So that might be, an example would be telling the students sounds and they need to put it together. So like b, a, t, and then you'd want them to say bat, or you might even chunk it where you would say b, at, and then they say bat. So that would be an oral blending activity, but you also want them to get to associate sound with the graphing, so then you would do blending on a whiteboard or smartboard or whatever you have, and you would write sound by sound, and then you'd have them blend it together. Sorting activities, and this can look different depending on the ability of your students. So you might have a word family sort where they have to sort based on the word family. So you might have an at family, and then they might have words that have like mat, cat, sat, or the Ike family, like bike, things like that. Or if they're not reading yet and you're really working on phonemic awareness, you might use picture cards where they have to sort them based on initial sound. Alconin boxes are boxes that are used to build phonemic awareness by segmenting words into individual sounds. So a student would have some kind of, maybe like a paper in front of them that would have 3 boxes on it, and they would push a counter or chip into the box as they hear the sound. So going back to that word bat, they would push b, a, t, and it really helps to give them a visual instead of just something abstract. So it helps them see the sounds. Making words, this is something that you would do with students. Definitely in any kind of phonics instruction, students would manipulate letters to form words. They can be given letter cards, and you would ask them to spell mat. And then from mat, you might ask them, say, okay, change mat to sat. So you really want them to see the relationship between words and sounds. Using decodable text. So traditionally, this means that you would be giving students a book that they can decode, and it's usually based on the sound that you're working on, or it might have some sight words in it, but generally the decodable books are meant for them to decode the words that have sounds that you are working on. Dictation would be when the teacher is giving the student a word and the student needs to spell it. So not only is this focusing on sound spelling recognition, but it helps the student realize that spoken language also can be transferred to written word. And I really like using dictation with students because it really gives me an insight onto their sound spelling recognition. And we talked a lot about this before, phonemic awareness. This is something that is very important in early literacy. You really need to have a strong foundation in phonemic awareness to be a successful reader. Okay, so we're going to move on to word recognition, focusing on irregular words. Okay, so irregular word reading. So what is it? Words with one or more sound spelling correspondences that a student doesn't know and therefore cannot sound out. Students have to rely on memorizing them as wholes or automatically by sight. Many of the most common words, high-frequency words in English, are irregular. So sometimes these are the words that do not follow the basic decoding rules. These words are often learned as sight words when children first learn how to read. So if you teach kinder or first or second, a good reading program has a bunch of sight words to introduce to them throughout the year. Students who have difficulty with sight words, this really affects their fluency and therefore affects their comprehension. So you can see how important it is to know their sight words, because if they don't know those sight words, it's really, really hard to improve your fluency, because there's many words in the English language that you cannot decode because they don't follow the basic decoding rules. Okay, so there's two types of irregular words. There's permanently irregular words and temporarily irregular words. So permanent ones are words that contain one or more sound spelling that are not pronounced conventionally. So for example, the word said, S-A-I-D, the A-I does, as a student knows, does not make the E sound. It would make the A sound. So that is a word that would actually break the decoding rules. So therefore, it would be a permanently irregular word. Also the number one, the spelling, O-N-E, that is another one. Bin, like B-E-E-N, those are definitely some permanently irregular words. So now temporarily, those are the ones that may start off irregular to a student, but they eventually become a regular word because they've been taught the sound spelling. An example of this would be the word for, F-O-R. So if they haven't been taught the O-R makes the OR sound, this would be an irregular word. But as you go on through your phonics instruction, you eventually introduce the OR sound, and then they might learn the word for, so then it becomes a regular word. Okay, so just to clarify, in case there's any misunderstandings, sight words are any word known by sight. High frequency words, these are most frequently occurring words in English text. And irregular words, words that cannot be decoded and should be memorized. So be careful, because sometimes we start to use sight words interchangeably with these words. Okay, so get to know some of these terms. Okay, so when should we teach them and assess them? Well, to teach, once the students can read CVC words, learn best through repeated encounters. So you're not just going to want to introduce it once. They're going to want to introduce it, and you're going to want to use text that they will encounter this word over and over again. And teach it in one lesson before they experience it in text. Okay, so how do we assess it? Well, monitor each type of word separately. For students above grade level or on grade level, monitor every 6 to 4 weeks. However, those who are below grade level, you should monitor those more frequently. Have them read aloud words from a list of recently taught words. And also keep a record of challenging sight words during reading of connected text. So it's very important that you do assess your students, not just every once in a while, but very frequently with the sight words, especially those students who may be your target students who are reading below grade level. You definitely want to get them reading those sight words and exposing to them and practicing and assessing every 2 weeks. Okay, so there's 3 types of irregular word assessments. So there's the in-depth assessment of sight word ability. So it's a comprehensive list like Fry or Dolch. So this one is required. So you have the Fry instant word list, which you'll be doing. There's a quick assessment of sight word ability, and that's in your core. In San Diego Quick, which is also in your core. And observation of sight word ability, which we always love because it's more in context. So like we said, like a running record, this can give you insight to the student's reading ability. And as mentioned before, limitations of these is that these are in isolation, so it's always good to do a running record. So high frequency words in Fry's list. Okay, half of all written material comprised of first 100 words and their variants. So when I said right here, when it's S and ING, okay, so the variants would be if you have the instant word write, the student would also need to be taught the word writes and writing so that they can learn those sight words, or I'm sorry, those high frequency words. Okay, so just here are some percentages of how many times these words appear in the text. So you can see that it is very, very powerful for students to know these high frequency words if they're going to be reading. It was mentioned in Fry's article that if a reader has to sound out a word like of or which, they're going to have a lot of trouble getting through a paragraph. So if they're trying to decode, they're wasting so much energy on decoding certain words that really maybe can't even be decoded. So it is so powerful for students to have a strong grasp on high frequency words. And this begins at a very young age. So, and the reason why it's called instant words is because the goal is to learn them instantly. And I hope you guys like my French fries over here to remind you about the fries list that you have to be doing next week. Okay, so how to teach them. Again, you want to have lots of repetition. You read, practice, use them in a sentence so they understand how it's being used. Flashcards, this is very handy. So you don't want to just use one strategy. You're going to want to use multiple strategies to teach the words. And word walls. I am a huge fan of word walls because it gives students a place where they can practice their sight words, and also if they're writing, they can refer to it to help them. So here is a sight word. A word wall, and this was actually mine last year. I called them anchor words to go with my sailor theme, but as you can see, these are some words that some of them cannot be sounded out.